The moment Owens watched the elegant man in the tailored navy suit step out of the limousine outside her family's struggling Italian restaurant in Boston's North End, she knew he was lost. Men like him didn't wander into Nana's kitchen unless they had taken a very wrong turn from wherever wealthy people spent their Thursday evenings. He paused on the sidewalk, glancing at his phone, then at the faded awning with its peeling paint, and Violet felt a flash of defensiveness mixed with embarrassment. This place had been her family's heart for 3 generations, even if it looked shabby compared to the gleaming establishments opening up around them. She was wiping down tables after the dinner rush, her dark hair escaping from its bun, her apron stained with marinara sauce. Her father was in the kitchen, her mother had gone home with a migraine, and Violet was essentially running the front of house alone. When the door chimed and the man walked in, she straightened up, suddenly aware of how tired she looked. "We're still open," she said, trying to sound welcoming despite her exhaustion. "Just me tonight, so service might be a little slow." He looked around the small dining room with its mismatched chairs and checkered tablecloths, and something in his expression softened. "That's fine, I'm in no hurry." His accent caught her off guard. It was crisp, British, with an underlying warmth that made her curious. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and striking features that suggested Middle Eastern heritage. When his eyes met hers, they were a deep brown that seemed to take in everything at once. "Sit anywhere you like," Violet said, gesturing to the empty tables. It was nearly 9, and most regulars had already gone home. He chose a table by the window and accepted the laminated menu she handed him. "What do you recommend? Honestly? Everything my father makes is incredible. The lasagna is his specialty, but the osso buco will change your life." She said it with pride, even though she knew the presentation would never match the upscale restaurants this man probably frequented. "Then I'll have the osso buco." He handed back the menu with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. Violet went to the kitchen to place the order, finding her father hunched over the stove as usual, his face red from the heat. Antonio Owens had been born in this neighborhood to Italian immigrants, and cooking was the only language he truly spoke fluently. "One osso buco, Papa," she said, kissing his weathered cheek. He grunted acknowledgement, already pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with practiced efficiency. Violet poured a glass of water and brought it to her lone customer, who was now on his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Busy night?" she asked, setting down the glass. He looked up, seeming almost surprised by the question. "You could say that. I'm supposed to be at a business dinner across town, but I've had enough of pretentious food that costs a fortune and tastes like nothing." Violet laughed, genuinely amused. "Well, you'll find the opposite here. Tastes like everything, costs almost nothing, and my father will probably feed you enough for 3 meals. Perfect." He extended his hand. "Xavier Quinn." She shook it, noting the firm grip and the warmth of his palm. "Violet Owens. My family owns this place." "It's charming," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "How long have you been here, in this location?" 60 years. My grandparents opened it when they came from Sicily. My father took over, and now I'm trying to keep it going." She hadn't meant to say that last part, but something about his direct gaze made her honest. "Trying to keep it going?" Xavier asked carefully. Violet bit her lip, wondering why she was confiding in a stranger. "The neighborhood is changing. Rent keeps going up and we can't compete with the new places. But this restaurant is my father's whole world. I can't let him lose it." Before Xavier could respond, another customer walked in, a regular who came every Thursday for spaghetti carbonara. Violet excused herself to take care of him, and the rest of the evening passed in a blur of serving, clearing, and managing the kitchen. When she finally brought Xavier his osso buco, she was rewarded by his expression as he took the first bite. "This is extraordinary," he said, looking genuinely amazed. "Told you," Violet said, unable to hide her pleased smile. She left him to eat, handling the last few customers of the night. By the time she made it back to Xavier's table, his plate was clean and he was leaning back in his chair with a satisfied expression she recognized. Her father's cooking had that effect on people. "I haven't had a meal like that in years," Xavier said as she cleared his plate. "What do I owe you?" She told him the modest price, and he pulled out his wallet. When he handed her his credit card, she noticed it was black, the kind reserved for people with unlimited spending. She processed it quickly, trying not to think about the vast difference between their worlds. "Thank you for a wonderful meal," he said, standing. "I'll definitely be back." Violet thought it was just politeness, the kind of thing people said. But Xavier returned the following Tuesday and then Thursday, and within 2 weeks he had become a regular fixture at Nana's kitchen. He always came alone, always late, and always seemed genuinely interested in talking to her between customers. She learned that he was 32, 6 years older than her, and that he worked in international real estate development. She learned that his father was Saudi Arabian, his mother British, and that he had grown up between London and Riyadh. She learned that despite his obvious wealth, he was surprisingly down to earth and had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. What she didn't learn, not right away, was exactly how wealthy he was. That information came accidentally, when she was cleaning up one evening and overheard 2 businessmen at the next table discussing a recent Forbes article about Boston's most successful entrepreneurs under 40. Xavier Quinn's name came up. Billionaire real estate developer. The man revolutionizing sustainable urban development across 3 continents. Violet nearly dropped the plates she was carrying. She glanced at Xavier, who was absorbed in his phone, and felt a sudden disconnect. This man, who sat in her shabby restaurant eating her father's cooking on mismatched plates, controlled a business empire worth billions. That night, after the restaurant closed, she found herself looking him up online. The articles painted a picture of a brilliant, driven businessman who had taken his father's modest construction company and transformed it into a global enterprise. There were photos of him at galas, ribbon cuttings, meetings with government officials. He looked different in those pictures, more formal and distant, nothing like the man who talked to her about his favorite books and asked about her day. She didn't mention what she had learned, and Xavier never brought it up. Their conversations continued, growing deeper and more personal. He told her about the pressure from his family to marry someone from their social circle, someone who understood the expectations and obligations that came with his position. She told him about dropping out of business school to help her parents, about her dreams of expanding the restaurant if they could ever afford it. The attraction between them was undeniable, building with every encounter, but Violet tried to ignore it. What would be the point? They existed in completely different worlds. Yet she couldn't help noticing the way his eyes lingered on her, the way he always seemed to time his visits for when she was working, the way he had started bringing his laptop and working from the corner table for hours, ordering multiple courses just to have an excuse to stay. It all came to a head on a rainy October evening. The restaurant had been particularly slow, and Violet was thinking about closing early when Xavier walked in, soaked from the downpour. "You didn't drive?" she asked, immediately grabbing a towel from behind the counter. "I walked." "I needed to think." He accepted the towel, running it through his hair. Water dripped from his expensive suit onto the worn linoleum floor. "About what?" Violet asked before she could stop herself. Xavier looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his expression that made her heart race. "About you." The air between them seemed to shift, charged with all the unspoken feelings they had been carefully avoiding. Violet's pulse quickened as he stepped closer. "Xavier, I don't think this is a good idea," she said quietly, even though every part of her wanted to close the distance between them. "Why not?" His voice was low, intense. "Because I have money. Because my family is from a different culture. Those things don't matter to me, Violet. You matter. The way you care about your family, your strength, your kindness, the way you make me feel like a normal person instead of a business opportunity. That matters. Your family would never accept me, Violet said, voicing the fear she had been carrying since she learned who he really was. And honestly, I don't know if I can fit into your world. I'm a restaurant manager from the North End who didn't finish college. You're a billionaire who probably has a waiting list of eligible women from good families. I don't want them, Xavier said simply. I want you. He cupped her face in his hands, and Violet felt her resistance crumbling. When he kissed her, gentle at first and then with increasing passion, she stopped trying to think about all the reasons this was complicated. Nothing had ever felt so right as being in his arms, the rain drumming on the windows and the smell of oregano and basil surrounding them. They started dating, though Violet insisted on keeping it quiet at first. She wasn't ready for the inevitable questions from her family, and Xavier had his own concerns about his parents' reaction. They stole moments together between her shifts, took late-night walks through the city, had dinner at small places where no one would recognize him. He showed her a side of Boston she had never seen, exclusive galleries and rooftop bars and private concerts. She showed him her world, the neighborhood festivals and family gatherings and simple pleasures he had somehow missed in his focused climb to success. 2 months into their relationship, Antonio Owens figured it out. He cornered Violet in the kitchen one evening after seeing Xavier kiss her goodbye. That man, her father said in Italian, the language he used when emotional. The one who comes here all the time, you're involved with him. Violet nodded, bracing herself for disappointment or anger. Instead, her father pulled her into a fierce hug. He's a good man, Antonio said gruffly. I can tell by how he looks at you, but Violet, be careful. Rich men, they live different lives. I know, Papa, but he's not like that. He's genuine. Her father studied her face, then sighed. You love him. Yes, Violet admitted the first time she had said it out loud. Then I trust your judgment, but he needs to meet the family properly, no more sneaking around. The following Sunday, Xavier came to the Owens family dinner. Violet's mother, Maria, had prepared enough food to feed 20 people, and the small apartment above the restaurant was packed with aunts, uncles, cousins, and assorted relatives. Xavier arrived in jeans and a simple shirt, holding flowers for Maria and wine for Antonio, and Violet loved him even more for not trying to impress them with his wealth. The dinner was chaotic, loud, and overwhelming, with everyone talking over each other and pushing more food onto plates already piled high. Xavier handled it with grace and genuine warmth, answering questions about his work and background without making anyone feel inferior. By the end of the evening, Violet's grandmother, the formidable Nonna Rosa, had declared him acceptable in Italian, which was the highest praise she gave anyone. But Violet knew meeting Xavier's family would be a different challenge entirely. He had been putting it off, making excuses about his parents' travel schedule and his brother's availability. Finally, in early December, he admitted the truth. I've told them about you, he said as they sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the harbor. They want to meet you. But Violet, you need to understand what you're walking into. My father is very traditional. He has expectations about who I should marry, what kind of family she should come from. My mother is more open-minded, but she still cares about appearances and status. Are you saying I'll embarrass you? Violet asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. No, Xavier pulled her close. You could never embarrass me. I'm saying that they might try to embarrass you to make you feel like you're not good enough. And I need you to know that none of their opinions matter. You are more than good enough. You're everything. The dinner was held at Xavier's parents' estate in Brookline, a sprawling property that made Violet feel like she had stepped into a different universe. She had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress that Xavier assured her was perfect. His mother, Layla Quinn, greeted them at the door with cool politeness, her elegant features composed and unreadable. His father, Rashid Quinn, was more overtly distant, his handshake perfunctory and his gaze assessing. Xavier's younger brother, Zachariah, was the only friendly face. He was 28, a doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital, and he immediately struck up a conversation with Violet about Boston's restaurant scene. The dinner itself was excruciating. Rashid asked pointed questions about Violet's family, her education, her career aspirations, each one designed to highlight the gap between their backgrounds. Layla talked about women from their social circle, dropping names of businessmen's daughters and politicians' nieces who had shown interest in Xavier. Through it all, Xavier held Violet's hand under the table, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. Finally, as dessert was being cleared, Rashid addressed Xavier directly in Arabic. Violet didn't speak the language, but she understood enough from his tone to know he was expressing disapproval. Xavier responded in the same language, his voice firm and unwavering. "In English, please," Layla said sharply. "It's rude to exclude our guest." "Father was just saying that he thinks I'm making a mistake," Xavier said, not breaking eye contact with Rashid. "That I should be with someone from our community, someone who understands our values and traditions." I was telling him that Violet understands what matters more than anyone I've ever met. She understands loyalty, family, hard work, and sacrifice. Those are our values, or at least they used to be. The silence that followed was deafening. Rashid stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You would throw away everything we've built for a girl from a failing restaurant." "I would choose love over obligation," Xavier said, standing as well. "And if you can't respect that, then we have nothing more to discuss." He took Violet's hand and led her out of the house, leaving his parents stunned in the dining room. They sat in his car for a long moment, neither speaking, before Xavier finally turned to her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry you had to endure that." "Don't apologize," Violet said, though her hands were shaking. "You defended me. You chose me. That means everything." They drove back to the city, and Violet felt the weight of what had just happened. Xavier had essentially broken with his family for her. She knew how much that cost him, despite his strained relationship with his parents. Over the following weeks, the rift seemed irreparable. Rashid refused Xavier's calls. Layla sent brief, cold text messages. Only Zachariah maintained contact, meeting them for coffee and expressing his support. The situation took a toll on Xavier. He threw himself into work, spending long hours at the office and coming to the restaurant late at night, exhausted and troubled. Violet hated seeing him like this, hated being the cause of his pain. She started to wonder if they should take a break, give him space to reconcile with his family, but every time she tried to broach the subject, Xavier shut it down. "I'm not losing you," he said firmly. "My parents will come around eventually, or they won't. Either way, you're my choice." Meanwhile, Nana's kitchen was facing its own crisis. The landlord had increased the rent again, and this time the numbers simply didn't work. Antonio and Maria were talking about closing, about selling the equipment and finding jobs elsewhere. Violet was desperately trying to find solutions, applying for small business loans and reaching out to potential investors, but nothing was working. She didn't tell Xavier the full extent of the problem, not wanting to burden him when he was already dealing with his family situation. But he noticed her stress, the way she stayed up late working on spreadsheets, the worry lines that appeared on her forehead. "Talk to me," he said one evening as they lay tangled together in his bed. "What's going on with the restaurant?" Violet hesitated, then told him everything. The rent increase, the dwindling customer base, the debt her parents had accumulated trying to stay afloat. She told him they had maybe 3 months before they would have to close permanently. Xavier listened without interrupting, his fingers running through her hair. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Let me help," he finally said. "No," Violet sat up, pulling away from him. "I can't take your money, Xavier. That's not why I'm with you. I know that. But watching you and your family struggle when I could easily solve this problem, it's killing me, Violet. I'm not talking about a handout. Let me invest in the restaurant properly. We can renovate, expand the menu, hire more staff. Turn it into something that honors your family's legacy while also being profitable." "I can't ask you to do that," Violet said, even though the offer was tempting beyond belief. You're not asking, I'm offering. This is what I do, Violet. I develop properties, I invest in businesses, I create sustainable growth. Let me do this for you, for your family. Not as your boyfriend, but as a businessman who sees potential. They argued about it for hours, Violet insisting she wouldn't be a charity case, Xavier pointing out that refusing help out of pride was foolish. Finally, exhausted and emotional, Violet agreed to let him present a proper business proposal to her parents. If they wanted his investment, she would accept it. The meeting happened at the restaurant on a Monday morning when they were closed. Xavier arrived with a full presentation, treating Antonio and Maria with the same respect he would give any business partner. He outlined his vision, realistic projections, and the terms of his investment. He would provide capital for renovations and expansion in exchange for a minority stake in the business. The Owens family would retain full control and creative direction. Antonio listened carefully, asking sharp questions that surprised Violet. She sometimes forgot how smart her father was, how he had kept the restaurant alive for decades through sheer determination and business savvy. Why? Antonio finally asked. You don't need this money. This restaurant is nothing to a man like you. Why do you care? Xavier glanced at Violet, then met Antonio's gaze directly. Because I love your daughter and this place matters to her. Because your food is the best I've ever tasted and more people should experience it. Because I believe in preserving things that have soul and history, not just tearing them down for profit. And because I would be honored to be part of your family's legacy. Maria started crying quietly. Antonio stared at Xavier for what felt like an eternity, then extended his hand. We accept. But we do this the right way. Lawyers, contracts, everything proper. You treat us like real business partners. I wouldn't have it any other way, Xavier said, shaking firmly. The renovation began in January. Xavier hired contractors who specialized in historic preservation, ensuring that the restaurant's character remained intact while modernizing the kitchen and dining room. He worked with Violet to refine the menu, bringing in a consultant who helped them balance tradition with innovation. Antonio was involved in every decision, his pride soothed by Xavier's genuine respect for his expertise. The project brought Xavier and Violet even closer. She saw how he handled the workers, the attention he paid to details, the way he listened to her parents' concerns and adapted his plans accordingly. He wasn't just throwing money at the problem, he was building something meaningful. During this time, something unexpected happened. Zachariah started stopping by the restaurant, initially to check on the progress but increasingly to talk to Violet's cousin, Sophia, who was helping with the renovation planning. The attraction between them was obvious, and soon they were dating as well. It created an unlikely bond between the two families, a bridge that neither set of parents could completely ignore. In March, Xavier Quinn showed up at the restaurant unannounced. Violet was checking inventory when she saw Xavier's mother standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and out of place. Violet's first instinct was to call Xavier, but something stopped her. Instead, she approached Layla with cautious politeness. Mrs. Quinn, this is a surprise. I wanted to see what my son has been working on, Layla said, her accent crisp. May I look around? Violet gave her a tour, showing her the renovated dining room with its restored brick walls and new lighting that somehow made the space feel both modern and timeless. She showed her the updated kitchen where Antonio was testing new recipes, the expanded seating area, the small garden patio they had added in the back. Through it all, Layla asked questions and made observations, her expression unreadable. Finally, in the empty dining room, Layla turned to Violet. My son has never been happier than he has been these past months. I've watched him build his empire, seen him succeed beyond anything his father or I imagined, but I've never seen him light up the way he does when he talks about you. Violet didn't know what to say. She had expected hostility or coldness, not this quiet admission. I was wrong, Layla continued, the words clearly difficult for her. I thought Xavier needed someone from our world, someone who understood the pressures and expectations. But you understand something more important. You understand him, and you've helped him remember why he started all this in the first place, not just to build wealth but to create something meaningful. Thank you, Violet said softly. That means more than you know. I'm not saying this will be easy, Layla warned. Rashid is even more stubborn than I am, but I'm willing to try if you are. I want my son in my life, and I can see that means having you in it as well. It was a beginning. Layla started coming to the restaurant occasionally, awkward at first but gradually warming up. She invited Violet and Xavier to dinner, just the three of them, and made an effort to ask about Violet's life and interests. She even met Maria for coffee, two mothers navigating the complicated situation their children had created. Rashid was harder. He refused to acknowledge the relationship, refused to discuss it, acted as though Violet didn't exist. Xavier bore it with stoic dignity, but Violet knew it hurt him. The rift between father and son seemed permanent until an unexpected event changed everything. In late April, Antonio had a heart attack. It happened in the restaurant kitchen during dinner service, and by the time the ambulance arrived, Violet was terrified she would lose her father. The doctors at Massachusetts General, where Zachariah worked, performed emergency surgery and said Antonio would survive, but it had been close. The family gathered in the hospital waiting room, exhausted and emotional. Xavier stayed by Violet's side, supporting her through the worst hours of her life. When Antonio finally woke up, groggy from anesthesia, he asked for Xavier specifically. "Promise me," Antonio said, his voice weak but clear. "If something happens to me, you'll take care of my daughter. You'll take care of my family." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Xavier said firmly. "But yes, I promise, I'll always take care of them." Violet's eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed by how much her father trusted this man, how fully Xavier had become part of their family. They were standing there, holding each other, when Rashid Quinn walked into the room. The older man stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. Violet had no idea how he knew they were there, but later she learned that Layla had called him, had told him it was time to see what really mattered. "Father," Xavier said, surprised and wary. Rashid approached slowly, his expression troubled. He looked at Violet, really looked at her, seeing the exhaustion and fear and strength in her face. Then he turned to his son. "I have been foolish," Rashid said in English, each word careful. "I thought I knew what was best for you, what would make you happy and successful. But I see now that you have already found those things. Your mother has been telling me this for months, and I did not listen. I'm listening now." Xavier seemed too stunned to speak. Rashid continued, addressing Violet directly. "My son tells me you are kind, hardworking, loyal to your family. These are not small things. These are everything. I judged you without knowing you, and that was wrong. I hope you can forgive an old man who was too set in his ways." "Of course," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion. "Family is everything to me, Mr. Quinn. I understand wanting the best for your son. I want that too." Rashid nodded, then surprised everyone by pulling Xavier into an embrace. "Be happy," he said simply. "That is all I truly want for you." The reconciliation wasn't immediate or perfect. There were still awkward moments, cultural misunderstandings, and adjustments on all sides. But both families made an effort, bringing together two very different worlds through the bridge of love and respect. The restaurant reopened in May to tremendous success. Xavier's renovations and Violet's vision had created something special, a place that honored tradition while embracing innovation. Food critics came and raved. Lines formed around the block. Antonio, recovered from his heart attack and under strict doctor's orders to reduce stress, finally agreed to hire more staff and let Violet and Xavier handle the business side. On a warm evening in June, Xavier took Violet to the restaurant after closing. She thought they were just going to review the month's numbers, but when she walked in, she found the dining room transformed. Candles everywhere, rose petals scattered on the floor, soft music playing from hidden speakers. "Xavier, what is this?" she asked, her heart already racing. He took her hand, leading her to the center of the room. "This is where we met, where I walked in looking for a meal and found everything I had been missing. You made me remember what matters, Violet. You made me whole." He got down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, beautiful but not ostentatious, a perfect balance between their two worlds. "Violet Owens, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you, supporting your dreams, and eating your father's incredible cooking?" Violet was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, deep and passionate, and Violet felt the perfect rightness of this moment. They had overcome so much to get here, bridged such different worlds, and somehow made it work. The wedding took place the following spring in a ceremony that blended both families' traditions. They were married by both a Catholic priest and an officiant who incorporated elements of Islamic tradition, creating something unique that honored both heritages. Maria and Layla worked together on the planning, becoming unlikely friends in the process. Antonio and Rashid bonded over their shared love of their children and their mutual appreciation for good food and business. Violet wore a dress that had been her grandmother's, altered and modernized, but still carrying the history of the women who came before her. Xavier wore a traditional suit with subtle touches that honored his Saudi heritage. The reception was held at the restaurant, naturally, with food that represented both families' cultures, a joyous fusion that had guests raving. Zachariah was Xavier's best man, and he spent most of the reception with Sophia, who caught the bouquet and blushed furiously when everyone cheered. Violet suspected there would be another wedding soon. As Violet and Xavier danced under strings of lights in the garden patio, surrounded by everyone they loved, Violet thought about how far they had come. A year and a half ago, she had been a tired restaurant manager watching a stranger step out of a limousine. Now she was married to that man, had helped bridge two families, had saved her family's legacy and built something new. "Happy," Xavier murmured against her hair. "Incredibly," Violet said, pulling back to look at him. "I never expected any of this. Neither did I, but I wouldn't change a single thing." They bought a house in the North End, close enough to the restaurant that Violet could walk to work, but spacious enough for the family they planned to have. Xavier continued running his business empire but scaled back his travel, preferring to spend his evenings with his wife. Violet took on more responsibility at the restaurant, expanding it further and opening a second location in Cambridge. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Rosa after Violet's grandmother. The old woman, now in her 90s, cried when they told her, holding the baby with trembling hands and saying prayers in Italian. Rashid and Layla were devoted grandparents, spoiling Rosa shamelessly and softening in ways Xavier had never seen. They had fully embraced Violet as their daughter, and Antonio and Maria had done the same with Xavier. The families celebrated holidays together, mixing traditions and creating new ones. Xavier often said that walking into Nana's kitchen that rainy night was the best decision he ever made. Violet would remind him that it was her father's osso buco that really sealed the deal, making him laugh and pull her close. The restaurant thrived, becoming a Boston institution known not just for its food but for its story, the place where a billionaire from a different culture fell for a restaurant manager and proved that love could bridge any divide. It was a story they told their children and eventually their grandchildren, a reminder that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or planned. They had to be felt, fought for, and cherished. Violet never forgot the moment she saw Xavier step out of that limousine, looking lost and out of place. She never expected that the elegant stranger would become her whole world, that their families would eventually not just accept but celebrate their union, that their different backgrounds would become a source of strength rather than division. But life had surprised her in the best possible way, proving that sometimes the most unlikely love stories were the ones that lasted forever.